Welcome to today's episode, everyone. I'm John, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Sarah. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating topics success. It's a word we hear all the time, but what if the key to achieving it isn't what we've been led to believe? Today, we're diving into the surprising truth about why some people seem to win at everything they do.
Oh, that's an intriguing way to start. What made you want to explore this topic?
Well, it's something that's been on my mind lately. We see these ultra successful people, entrepreneurs, athletes, artists, and it's easy to think they've got some secret sauce the rest of us don't. But here's the kicker: most of them are doing something we don't often see or talk about.
Hmm, that's interesting. So, what is this hidden factor?
It all comes down to mindset, but not just any mindset, we're talking about a growth mindset. It's the belief that no matter where you start, you can always improve, learn, and get better. And here's where people often get stuck. They don't realize that success isn't a destination, it's a daily practice.
That makes a lot of sense. So, it's not about reaching some magical endpoint where suddenly everything falls into place.
Exactly. It's about the habits and practices these successful individuals develop over time. And it's not just about working harder or being more disciplined. It's about working smarter, making better decisions, and constantly improving their strategies.
That reminds me of a story I once heard about a young entrepreneur. She was struggling to get her business off the ground, working 18-hour days, barely sleeping. She thought that's what it took to be successful.
Oh, I can imagine how that turned out. It's a common trap people fall into, isn't it? Thinking that success is all about grinding yourself into the ground. But let me guess, she was burning out fast?
Spot on. But then she met a mentor who completely changed her perspective. This mentor taught her about energy management, not just time management.
Ah, now we're getting to the good stuff. You see, successful people know when to push hard and when to rest. They understand that burnout is real, and they avoid it by learning to pace themselves. It's all about finding that sweet spot between hustle and recovery.
That's fascinating. And it ties into another important aspect of success: resilience. It's not about avoiding failure, it's about embracing it, right?
Absolutely. Successful people fail more than anyone else, but they don't let failure define them. They learn from it, pivot, and keep going. It reminds me of that famous Thomas Edison quote about the light bulb. When a reporter asked him how it felt to fail 1,000 times, Edison replied, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps."
What a powerful perspective. It really changes how you look at failure, doesn't it?
It does. And here's another key point. Successful people are constantly refining their routines. They're always asking themselves, how can I improve this? What's working? What's not? They're never satisfied with the status quo. Take Elon Musk, for example. He's known for breaking his day into 5-minute slots to maximize productivity.
Wow, that's intense. How does he manage that?
Well, it's all about extreme time management, but what's interesting is that he's constantly tweaking this system, always looking for ways to optimize it further. And I think that's a big part of why many people stay stuck in mediocrity. They think that once they reach a certain point, they can coast.
But the real winners are the ones who never stop evolving, right?
Exactly. It's about constantly upgrading your mindset, your habits, and your strategies. It's a never ending process of self improvement. All this talk about success and failure reminds me of a personal experience. A few years ago, I decided to run a marathon.
Oh, that's quite a challenge. How did it go?
Well, let's just say it was a humbling experience. I trained for months, but on the day of the race, I hit the wall hard around mile 18. I was in pain, exhausted, and seriously considering quitting. But you know what kept me going? Remembering all the stories I'd heard about successful people pushing through adversity. I kept telling myself that this pain was temporary, but if I quit, I'd regret it forever.
That's incredible. Did you finish?
I did, but it wasn't pretty. I was one of the last people to cross the finish line. But here's the thing: crossing that finish line didn't suddenly make me a successful person. It did show me what I was capable of when I put my mind to something and refused to give up, and that's a lesson I've carried with me into every other area of my life.
That's such a powerful story. And I think it really drives home the point that success isn't about being the best or the fastest. It's about being better than you were yesterday, about pushing your own limits and growing from every experience.
Exactly, and that ties into another important aspect of success, the ability to delay gratification. Successful people have mastered this art. They know that short-term discomfort often leads to long-term rewards. They have a vision and they're willing to make sacrifices today to achieve it tomorrow.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. It's like planting seeds and being patient enough to wait for them to grow, right?
That's a great analogy, and it's not always easy. In our instant gratification culture, it can be really challenging to resist immediate rewards in favor of long-term gains. But that's often what separates the truly successful from those who just dream about success.
Can you give an example of how this might play out in real life?
Sure thing. Let's say you're trying to start a business. In the early stages, you might have to work long hours for little pay, or even invest your own money with no guarantee of return. It would be much easier to stick with a steady job and regular paycheck. But the successful entrepreneur is willing to make those sacrifices now for the potential of greater rewards in the future.
That's a great point. It reminds me of the famous marshmallow experiment with children.
Oh yes, the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. For our listeners who might not be familiar, this was a study done in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Researchers would bring a child into a room and offer them a choice. They could have one marshmallow now, or if they waited for 15 minutes without eating it, they could have two marshmallows.
And the results were quite interesting, weren't they?
They were fascinating. The researchers followed up with these children years later and found that those who were able to delay gratification and wait for the second marshmallow generally had better life outcomes. They had higher SAT scores, lower levels of substance abuse, lower likelihood of obesity, better social skills, and more.
That's incredible. It really shows how this ability to delay gratification can have far reaching effects on our lives.
Absolutely, and the good news is this is a skill that can be developed. It's not something you're born with or without. Like any other aspect of success, it's something you can work on and improve over time.
So, what are some strategies people can use to build this skill?
Great question. One effective strategy is to practice mindfulness. When you're tempted by immediate gratification, take a moment to pause and really think about your long-term goals. Another strategy is to remove temptations from your environment. If you're trying to eat healthier, don't keep junk food in the house.
Those are great tips. It sounds like it's all about being intentional and mindful about our choices.
Exactly. And it's also about reframing how we think about delayed gratification. Instead of seeing it as a sacrifice or deprivation, try to see it as an investment in your future self. Every time you choose the harder but more beneficial option, you're essentially making a deposit in your future success bank.
I love that perspective. It really changes how you look at those difficult choices.
It does, doesn't it? And that brings us back to our original question about why some people seem to win at everything they do. It's not that they're luckier or more talented than everyone else. It's that they've developed these key skills and mindsets: growth mindset, resilience, consistency, energy management, and the ability to delay gratification.
So, to sum it up, success isn't about some magical formula or secret. It's about daily habits, mindset, and the willingness to do what others aren't willing to do.
Exactly. It's about making smart decisions, being consistent, and above all, learning from every experience. Success is built over time, one small, intentional action at a time. And as we wrap up today's show, I think it's important to remember that everyone's journey is different. What works for one person might not work for another. The key is to find what works for you and to keep refining and improving your approach.
Well said. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
We certainly have. Remember, listeners, success isn't about winning at everything you do. It's about growing, learning, and becoming a better version of yourself every day. Your journey to success starts now with the very next decision you make. Until next time, keep pushing those boundaries. Your future self will thank you for it.
That's it for today's episode, folks. We hope you're leaving with some valuable insights on how you can start making changes today to create lasting success. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who needs to hear it. Thanks for listening, and remember, your success starts now.